It is finals week throughout the WCC. There aren't too many games this week, but we have a lot to get into. The Zags continue to roll. St. Mary's having a really solid performance in their first true road game. Santa Clara, against New Mexico at New Mexico. Welcome all into the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. I'm Zach Farmer. That's Thomas Dunn. So yeah, we have a lot to get into. We'll talk a little bit about the games. There aren't too many games in midweek. We're looking at a full weekend slate as we're getting through the last of finals and everything else at each of the campuses. And we'll get into that. We'll get into the power rankings. We'll get to the Zags and Gales shortly. But I think we have to start with Thomas. Your Santa Clara Broncos were looking pretty good going into New Mexico, and then what the hell happened in the pit?
Okay, so full premise and context about this. This is the analyst hat is off right now. Okay, this is just like when Zach is mad about St. Mary's having to go to Idaho Falls to play Boise State for the millionth time in a row. That is the hat I'm wearing right now. Okay, full disclosure. I am not happy because a performance like that, for me, amplifies the St. Louis loss a little bit more. That's one now I really wanted to get because of I was shocked at how unprepared, the lack of focus, and really how it all encapsulated itself is the way that they invited everything that New Mexico wanted to do consistently for 40 minutes. And the one thing that really, or the series of things that really just ticked me off, fast break points, 29-3. This is not the team to be a full court pressing against. New Mexico has been struggling in half-court offense under Eric Olin. They have not been executing on all cylinders. So because Santa Clara is pressing up against them in the backcourt, they couldn't stay in front of Dayton Albury all game. So Albury's going straight to the bucket like no one's business. And every single guy around him, whether it was Albury, whether it became Antonio Choi, whether it became another guard, or even JT Rock coming off the bench in 12 minutes having 11 and 6, Santa Clara did nothing right in this game. And it was very astounding at the lack of urgency, the lack of how unprepared they were. And eventually how they got socked in the mouth and couldn't necessarily, they responded once, couldn't do it. There were 3 separate kill shots from New Mexico in that game of 10-0 runs or worse. And you just can't have that, especially in a game where everyone's looking at you. Like, this is your at-large hopes on the line right here. And Santa Clara got punched in the mouth and basically TKO'd on the mat. And beyond that, New Mexico, they got to the cup at will. Santa Clara's been a very physical team this year, and it was anything but that at the pit. The Lobos shot 74% from 2. 74. And unabated lines to the rim. There was really no resistance at the point of attack. And Zach, I mentioned it last week, and don't even get me started, man. Stop fouling. Please. Stop. I beg of you. Like, I understand fouling happens in this game. Santa Clara let New Mexico in the bonus with 13:30 to go in the first half. There were 8 fouls in more than 7 minutes of play. The day Buki Aboye stops fouling immediately into games, that will be a day. But 2 possessions, 2 fouls, that was discouraging. But just in general, the Broncos have to stop fouling. It's really getting to be more than an annoyance. It's actually an active hindrance to them winning and playing winning basketball. And of course, offensively, they kept dragging themselves into lazy double teams and the way Eric Olin's defense likes to approach things. So say you're on the mid baseline, you're going to get automatic help no matter what. So like, for example, if Elijah Mahi wants to back down and think he can get a turnaround fadeaway 10-footer, that's actually not going to happen. They're going to shut that off. So Santa Clara had to be snappy with the ball, and instead they kept turning it over, inviting double teams. Broncos, I say only, but they had 15 turnovers, so they were very loud turnovers, and especially with a loud crowd in the pit. They got consumed by the pit. They had the wrong game plan in the wrong geography for the wrong team, and that's how you get a result like that, 98-71, and one where I'm not happy about it because I don't usually, Zach, I hate to put the pressure right back on you here, but you don't have to worry about those types of performances really, if at all. So that was really the most discouraging part because that there's a lot on the line if you're Santa Clara. That's why I'm so disappointed. There's so much on the line for you. And yes, now you need these Arizona State and North Texas games. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I was already saying that, yeah, I would like you to win it, but now you really got to win it. So that's where I'm at. I'm just disappointed with the how as opposed to the what, because, losing happens. All right. It will always happen throughout the season for any number of different reasons. But when it happens like that, I'm not happy.
I mean, I get the frustration, and you're right. It's like that game. This was a lifeless Santa Clara team. This was not the team we've seen really over the course of the first month plus. This was a it was lifeless, and just the number of times you could just see them big turnstile all the way to the basket was kind of ridiculous. We had talked about how good the Santa Clara defense had been kind of coming into this one, and this one was just an absolute disaster of a game. You're right, like they just cannot keep guys in front of them. They were just be able to get to the basket at will. Buki Aboye just like fouled out in this one again. This was I think one of the bigger things was that New Mexico was clearly on the attack the entire game, and Santa Clara just had no answer. And I think that's one of the points to look at here is that kind of Santa Clara has been able to dictate most of the games they played. I mean, look at even in the game against St. Louis, like very good St. Louis team, and just how much like they kind of even were able to control that game and control the pace a little bit more in that one. But from the get-go, New Mexico just ran them off the floor. This was kind of over, like if in the second half really quickly. Santa Clara got back into it toward the end of the first half, but the beginning of that second half, the Lobos just took off and they really controlled this game the rest of the night. But I will talk you back onto the ledge a bit, because I don't think that even though it was a 20-plus point loss, that is still a tough place to play against a New Mexico team that is not, I don't think, as far away from where we thought they were a year ago. Now, maybe they're inching closer and closer to maybe an at-large consideration or whatever else. But I don't think they're that far removed from the New Mexico team that Richard Pitino was leading just last year. We saw it last night. Like they're starting to kind of inch their way back into the conversation in also a down Mountain West overall. So I think there's going to be opportunity for this New Mexico team to end up being a not so terrible loss for Santa Clara as we go down the road. And the Broncos already have a couple of good wins. They do still have a couple more opportunities. And then let's be honest, like you were still probably going to have to beat either Gonzaga or St. Mary's once you got into WCC play anyway. So I don't look at the loss to New Mexico as being that bad of a deal, because again, I mean, even you look at what St. Mary's and what's happened to Gonzaga, St. Mary's. Gonzaga lost by 40. St. Mary's lost by 25. Like they also have big lopsided losses on their resume, and it's more amount of the totality of the resume as opposed to the one game. Now, if this had happened against Southern Utah, if this had happened against, if this happens against Loyola in a couple of weeks, now we're talking about a completely different thing. But the fact that it happened on the road at the pit against New Mexico, it's not as big of a deal against the resume. Still a lot of work to do, and there was always going to be that. But this is not one of those games where you can't overcome a quote unquote bad loss. This isn't a quote unquote bad loss. Not great loss, still like lopsided on the score, but there's still plenty left on the schedule, the resume to get Santa Clara back into the conversation. I don't think they've been removed from that conversation quite yet.
I think and I'm glad you brought this up, because I think they could be mutually exclusive things. So yes, there is still lots more runway for Santa Clara to do it and to make things happen. And we know that, the Broncos have expectations now. I didn't necessarily have those expectations at the start of the year, but now what you do and what you show me has led me to believe that, yes, now New Mexico, ASU, North Texas can be a stretch run to where you can establish yourself as a March Madness contending team. Now, in the same vein, I'm just, like I mentioned earlier, I'm just not pleased with the how things transpired really in the pit, because it can and has shown to be better from the Broncos throughout the season. And basically it was Christian Hammond versus the world at one point. He scored 16 of the last 20 points for the Broncos in the first half. And going into the second half, I thought KJ Cochran provided some all right minutes. I thought Francis Chukwudebele and Alan Graves provided some all right minutes in spurts. But then they got down to 1 after being down 18, and it just fell off the cliff from there. So it just really, I'm more alarmed with how overwhelmed they were, considering where New Mexico was and considering where Santa Clara was. You lose by 5 points, you lose by 5 points, you lose by 10. It happens. But just the manner in which it happened, that's really what stood out to me. And obviously not having Jake Ensminger is a big deal. And I don't think we give enough credence to how much of a connector he is on both sides of the floor. That's both offensively in terms of the flow and defensively in terms of defensive rebounding, because the Broncos' defensive rebounding has dipped without Jake Ensminger. And it's not even necessarily for the pure numbers. he makes life easier for everybody else to gobble up those rebounds. And I think that's, if you go back and watch how Santa Clara operates with him on the floor, that's kind of what you notice. So it makes life easier for guys like Alan Graves. And I think when you look at some of the fight that has to happen without him, without Ensminger, it starts kind of with Alan Graves, who's getting those starts. But, it wasn't all bad this week, because going back to last Wednesday, Jalen Williams' jersey retirement, we got to sit down with him, have a press conference during halftime of that Utah Tech game. And it was cool to see Jalen Williams has a big time affection for Santa Clara, and rightfully so, and you would agree with this in your own vacuum. And I think all of our listeners would. You all have your own unique relationship with your alma mater. And especially if you're a professional athlete, you don't necessarily have to come back all that often, if at all. Like, you could be a one and done at Kentucky, and then you're like, all right, I won't see Kentucky for 20 plus years. Or you can be like Jalen. He's now shown up 3 times in his 4 years, probably more if, with non-social media reported visits, but at least 3 times in the 4 seasons now that he's been in the NBA. And he's shown that love, shown that affection, and he mentioned it all. He gives so much credit to the coaching staff for bringing the fire that he needed in order to continue to enjoy pursuing basketball. Because lest we forget, one of his first seasons, Santa Clara is playing in Santa Cruz because of the pandemic. So I think that was cool to see. And then the recognition, his family was there. Some of his high school friends were there, even Oklahoma City Thunder, and their general manager, Sam Presti, was there. So all in all, a feel good moment on a feel good night. And that eventually ended with some theatrics, as Alan Graves recently announced as WCC Freshman of the Week. And I'm not going to say the conference officer gave him the award because of this, but for our narrative, let's run with it. Flight 22, get out of the way. Alan Graves coming down the line here with just under 90 seconds to play at the Levy Center, and he puts Chance Trujillo in the basket himself. Now, Trujillo, I said it right off the bat. I mean, that was a pretty Bush League response. I understand that yelling in his ear is not, I would feel some type of way about that too. But if you can push, you can jaw, you just can't punch. It's just really as simple as that. And it got him a lot more notoriety than he probably was expecting, especially if he just sat there and then they end up getting double tees after the fact. So he got his name out there, but I'd be pressed too if I got yammed into the earth by Alan Graves. So a big credit to the Santa Clara Broncos big man for winning Freshman of the Week in that, and capping off a feel-good night against Utah Tech at the Levy Center.
Yeah, I mean, you texted me because I was following the game along, but I saw the game. I was like, all right, it seems like it's in hand. Like I'm turning off, and then all of a sudden everything just goes sideways with the dunk and the punch, and but some exciting endings to that one. So something to be a little bit positive about. Obviously, before Santa Clara went the complete opposite direction.
I am not all negative. I swear. All
right, but now a team that does have a lot to be happy about and excited about, especially after what we saw just a couple of weeks at the end of Feast Week, not obviously totality, but the Zags getting their game against Kentucky and absolutely embarrassing the Wildcats on Friday night. Mark Few continues to just have ownage on Mark Pope. Doesn't seem to matter where Mark Pope ends up, whether it's BYU, whether it's Kentucky. This is ownage. And this Zag team just came out the gates. Obviously, like, they were going to feel a sort of way after the game against Michigan, losing that game the way they did. Heard it in post-game comments from Mark Few, just how challenging and tough the practices were all week long. Again, like, that's you don't see a Zag team lose by that ever, because again, like, that was the largest margin of defeat that had ever happened under Mark Few, the 40 against Michigan. But then to come back against Kentucky and to really just be the dominant force from the get-go. They won 94-59. At one point, they were up in this game 19-2 right at the start of this one. There was some anger, there was chippiness. The Zags were ready for this game. But the one thing I think that's interesting to know, like, at the beginning of this one, it didn't seem like they were in a rush. They were still patient, but they were still able to move the ball like they normally do, play the pace that they normally do. And more than anything, it was the defense that just seemed to be everywhere against Kentucky. The swarming defense, they were closing on shooters well. They sped Kentucky up, which sounds kind of hard to do. Like, how do you speed up a team that already plays as fast as Kentucky? But they got them out of sorts. The having Emmanuel Innocente in that starting lineup really gives them that different dynamic because it does make them a little bit bigger on the perimeter. Having Mario Saint-Superi also in that group gives them a different look and feel. But Graham Ike he clearly after the last game was just upset, angry, pissed off. And he came through in a big way in that game. He had 17 at the half. He ended up finishing the game with 28 and 10. This was probably one of the best performances we've seen from the Zags all year. And that's saying something considering the performances we've seen from the Zags all year long. Well, that be when you think about what they did to Creighton, what they did to Alabama, what they did to Maryland. Like, this is a Zags team that has yet to play a single-digit game. Every single one of their games has been a double-digit affair. And it's obviously it speaks to where the offense is. And this is one of the things, like, I think about this Gonzaga squad and what they've been able to accomplish to this point. And the Zag offense looks like the Zag offense. Like, that, I don't see a ton of difference. Yes, some of the faces are different, but it looks like a Mark Few run offense. The difference has been the defense. It's the fact that they are bigger, there's more commitment. And honestly, it's also because you have pieces on this team who don't have to do it all anymore. I think about like Tyon Graham-Foster. When he was at Grand Canyon, he kind of was Mr. Do Everything for them. And now that he's with the Zags, he doesn't have to do it all. He doesn't have to be the 20 plus per game scorer. He can play more defense. He can dive after the loose balls. He can do a lot of the little things that you may not necessarily have the energy to do when you have to be the heavy lift scorer on a squad. And the one thing I think, just looking at the second unit on the Zags team is kind of getting ridiculous because you look Braden Smith, Tyon Graham-Foster, Jalen Worley, and Adam Miller coming off the bench for this Gonzaga team is that foursome is better than most everyone's starting lineup when you really think about it. And the fact that this is like unit number 2 for Gonzaga speaks to just their depth and also just the veteran presence that this team has, because all these guys have had multiple stops. They kind of know how this goes, and they're playing a willing role in Mark Few's offense and on this team.
Yeah, I like the fact that in that game they kind of were hunters within the uneasiness of the Kentucky fandom. So I know that's dubbed a neutral site game at Nashville, but it was at least 95% Kentucky fans in there, and they were coming off a heartbreaking loss to North Carolina. But like you mentioned at the start, a Mark Few team beating a Mark Pope team. Where have we seen this before? And I think we kind of have like a special lens into some of the expectations and some of the things that we do kind of expect to see from Kentucky, because Mark Pope in his last few years, lest we forget, BYU is finishing 4th and 5th in the WCC. Like this, there was no easy pickings for them. And then all of a sudden he gets an upgrade to his alma mater spot, but one where there's not going to be much patience. And when you come off those close losses and some of those other losses throughout Feast Week, if you're Kentucky, I mean, the uneasiness was kind of felt from the jump. And then Gonzaga just put their foot on Kentucky's neck and just kept going. And you can sense that veteran presence in doing so and almost turning that crowd against Kentucky, and then eventually doing so, because Wildcats didn't have their first field goal of the game until with 11 minutes to go in the half. So, I mean, you want to talk about Zag defense, it's exactly like that. And the crowd was booing immediately. It's not like it was a slow burn, and because Kentucky was getting blown out by 40 in the second half, then they were booing. No, this was happening immediately within the first few minutes of the game. And that's like, quote unquote, the de facto home team just getting taken to the woodshed by the fan base. And that's a credit to Gonzaga for forcing the issue, consistently doing so. I like the fact that you highlighted Graham Ike's presence, and the way I kind of view Tyon Graham-Foster right now is, if you think back to like a Bugs Bunny and in the Roadrunner, like I think of Tyon Graham-Foster as like the Roadrunner. Like, you just bottle him up, just let him be, you let him stir on the bench, because obviously everyone's expecting him to start and do the whole 9 yards, and that may be the case later on in the season. But as for now, you bottle him up and you just kind of unleash that energy and just bounces all over the arena, and that's kind of, it's contagious, especially when you mention that second unit and kind of the energy they bring. I know a trio of seeing Innocente, Tyon Graham-Foster, and Jalen Worley at one time on the floor defensively. No, thank you. So Gonzaga doing a great job on both ends of the floor, and I like the fact that they forced the issue. And when you now they're probably going to get a home crowd against UCLA up in Seattle, so lots of good things to like if you're the Zags right now. And I think more than anything, they're taking care of their business. And obviously, while some teams that they faced and presumably we thought they'd be better, like Creighton, Oklahoma. They aren't as good as we thought. It's still a mutually exclusive thing for the Zags to take care of their business. And that I think the same holds true against Kentucky, because I don't think the Wildcats are particularly that good this year. They've really fallen off a cliff relative to standard, but also you have to force the issue. You have to take care of your own business. Mark Few, the rest of the Zags are doing that. And I think they're defying my expectations for sure. I thought for a second that they might slide out to the late rankings or even out of it for a stint, kind of like last year. And they've more than proven me wrong. And I'm excited to see how they can continue to attack it.
Yeah. And then it's funny because a couple nights later, I mean, as great as the Zags have been, everything else. A couple nights later, they had North Florida on Sunday night, and Sunday morning I went and looked at it's like I don't usually pay that much attention to I don't put much weight on the spreads of games or whatever else, and I opened it up, and my eyes popped at the 46.5 point spread against North Florida, and even thinking of it is so ridiculous, so over the top. But you know what? I think I'm taking the over. And guess what? Gonzaga won by 51.
Great team. Great teams cover. Great teams cover.
Great teams cover. And the Zags indeed did cover. This is going to be an interesting matchup on Saturday against UCLA. Again, you mentioned it at Climate Pledge Arena in Seattle. Not a place that Gonzaga has actually played all that particularly well. So as we get kind of a little bit deeper, we'll talk a bit more about that matchup with UCLA, because big matchup, a team that the Zags are obviously very familiar with over the years. They've had their matchups with any number of various of UCLA teams, head coaches. Mick Cronin coming up to Seattle to take on the Zags. We'll see about that. But we're also going to talk about what happened in North Carolina and at Davidson over the weekend, because the Gales were there for their first true road game. It wasn't exactly the best of performances for St. Mary's, but you know who did? Josh Dent. Josh Dent has continued to just grow and grow in his role. 19 points on Sunday in the Gales 70-61 win at Davidson. This is the sophomore just continues to just get better and better. And I know, Thomas, you're going to get into it a little bit too, but the more I see him play, the more he looks like a level combination of Augustus Marshallonis and Mickey McConnell. And of course makes a lot of sense because his old teammate and now his coach.
Yeah. And I think when you look at how St. Mary's has gotten to this point in the season, there's been a lot of Mikey Lewis, and rightfully so. And there's been a lot of Paulus Morauskas in this type of game. And while they didn't play quote unquote bad games, but they didn't play up to their usual standard. They didn't play with the usual volume that you're going to get from the Gales offense. So that means it's got to come from somebody else. And you mentioned Josh Dent, and I'll give more credence to him in a second, but another steady performance from Andrew McKeever, another double notched. And I think more than anything, I also want to shine a light off the bench, Harry Wessels. I thought he also had a very steady performance. So when you look at that kind of 1-2 tandem approach from Randy Benton and using his big men, I think you can see where the net positive won out, especially in the end. And you're going to have to find different ways to win throughout the season. I think when you look at not having Lewis and Morauskas firing on all cylinders, moving to McKeever and Wessels as nice secondary support for Josh Dent, it's good, because the thing that stands out to me, at least, is Dent is very steady. And when you look at, you mentioned that Marshallonis comparison, I think that's kind of where I align myself the most with Marshallonis. And I don't necessarily have the best Gale guard history. Like my first inclination of what the Randy Bennett guard tree is I watched Dellavedova growing up and stuff, but Stephen Holt was kind of like the first guy that is etched in my mind. And they're not the same player, but just in general in terms of what I'm going with compared to what you're comparing with, and obviously Mickey McConnell being on the bench right now as Josh Dent kind of has this coming out party. But we want to see how Dent can kind of figure himself out on the road, especially because it's not going to be easy when you're at Gonzaga. It's not going to be easy when you're at San Francisco, at Santa Clara, at Seattle, especially if they're playing in Climate Pledge. So this was a good test in a number of different ways. And it wasn't necessarily about the results or the execution, I think, for Josh Dent heading into this game. It just ultimately the analysis is coming out that way. For me, it was more of his process. What does he look like in terms of running the offense? How sped up is he? And I think he passed those tests, at least for me, with flying colors.
And I with Josh Dent, one correction, I did say 19. It was 21 points against Davidson. So I I didn't give him the full credit that he actually deserved in that one. Also 5 assists. But kind of true to a St. Mary's team, like there's always like just somebody else kind of in the wings that is going to be able to step up in those spots. Because you're right. It's like this was not the best of nights for Mikey Lewis or Paulus Morauskas. The two combined for 18 points. Lewis was 5 for 18. Morauskas was 3 for 12. But they found a way. Dylan Shaw coming off the bench, 10 rebounds. Big boost there as well. Again, the St. Mary's team doing kind of one of the things it does best is they rebound the basketball. They keep teams from having those second chance opportunities. And going into a place like Davidson, again, like this is going to be a good Davidson team in the A10. And St. Mary's just kind of continues to check off boxes. I know that they don't have, you look at the names of the teams that they have played, it's not, they don't jump off the page as being like, oh, look at the win over here. Oh, look at the win over here. But they continue to just get the job done. And the metrics continue to actually like what the Gales do, because if you, again, very early on, it's only second full week of the net. They're sitting at 15 as of today. So regardless of what you may think of their schedule, guess what? Metrically, it's exactly what the computers like to see. They have their own one against quad 1, but they're 3-0 in quad 2. So they've already done some damage there and are getting those road wins, getting those good neutral site wins. But the big one, the one I'm was on the soapbox about in the offseason is coming up finally this week. The game against Boise State in Idaho Falls.
Your favorite.
TV, not on TV, so no one will see it. If a game happens in Idaho Falls and no one's there, does it actually happen?
Well, it does. It quite honestly does, as you know from experience. However, I will say this, because I remember from my own experience last year in the lead up to this. If I'm not mistaken, Boise State added like a web stream to last year's game within the last 48 hours before tip-off. So, we can revisit this later in the week and then have a rant, and we can tag the Boise State athletic department if we so please. But if this is in the Broncos' hands, kind of like last year, making a plea right now to AD Jeremiah Dickey, can we get a web stream up there? Can we get the Mountain West Network of all things? Is there any way to do that? Because I believe the arena is usually a hockey arena mainly, or / convention center. I'm not 100% sure on that. But I know they put up a web stream last year from like the top. It was such a wide but really sharply down angle I think it was on Boise State's actual website. So it wasn't even technically a TV stream. It was just one game cam and I think one tight cam. So Jeremiah Dickey, if you're listening, if we can run that back, please. I know, obviously, I don't know if the Mountain West Network is on the table at this point in time, or I don't know why any other ESPN Plus or even CBS Sports Network aren't picking this up. Maybe it's just because of the production value of the arena, but find a way, please, to get that web stream up, because obviously these are two very good teams that deserve to get that spotlight on them. But Zach, just to slow your roll on some of your soapbox, there is a chance that a stream may happening, but just to be late in the game.
Yeah, we'll continue to monitor that one. Now, with Boise State, I do want to kind of because there was a lot of making fun of Boise State very early on in the season, because their opener for the season is where they lost to Hawaii Pacific by 1 at home. So there was a lot, almost kind of an early write-off of Boise State about what this team could be. However, of recent note, it's like they weren't in the Maui Invitational. They did lose. They lost close to a very good USC team. They didn't do so well against NC State, but their most recent game, they went into Hinkle Fieldhouse and got a 77-68 win against Butler. So you cannot overlook this Boise State team. You cannot think that this Boise State team, I was like, oh, they have that really embarrassing loss early on in the non-conference. Like they're not the same team we thought. No, they are still going to be in that conversation. They are still going to be one of the better teams in the Mountain West. It just took them a little bit of time to kind of get here. They do play Duquesne in the middle of the week before they play St. Mary's on Sunday. St. Mary's does not have a game until the game next week, so the Gales will be fully rested after they return home, and then from North Carolina, then have to hop on a plane and head back to Idaho Falls for that one. But third year in a row, St. Mary's will be making that trip. The Gales are 0-2 on the first 2. We will see if St. Mary's can finally get over that hump and be able to beat the Broncos out on the road.
I'm sure you're so happy that this game is happening again. I can tell.
Yes.
I can sense your excitement from here.
Now, now we've got a lot. The rest of the league is kind of like there's a lot of moving pieces with the rest of the conference. And one of the teams that did get a big win over the weekend was USF. The Dons did go down to Mississippi State, and as chaotic and as many times as it seemed like USF was trying to lose that game, they did not. They came out with a win against Mississippi State in what is pretty much a pseudo home game for Mississippi State. It was down in the bayou. No, not the bayou, next door to the bayou.
You're
But
gonna piss a lot of people off, Zach.
yeah, I will correct myself. It's wrong state. No, one next door
Yeah.
in Mississippi. But this USF team, I mean, I still have a lot of question marks, even though they got this win against Mississippi State. This is not the Mississippi State team that a lot of people thought we would see to this point. This is not the USF team a lot of us thought we would see to this point. And even though they got the win in here, I just have serious questions about what USF is going to be long term, because they just continue to get beat up on the glass. And we're not going to overlook the fact that they also lost to North Alabama earlier in the week.
Yeah.
And we at home.
Yeah.
Like this is a USF team that is just, it feels like they're on the rope. They're reeling. And the fact that they got this win is at least like gets them back upright, but there's still a lot of issues that this team needs to figure out before they get to WCC play.
Yeah, 1000%. And I think when you look at this is really a box of chocolates week. If you're USF, I mean, they're up 16-2, I think 24-6 against North Alabama. And I'm pretty sure North Alabama is going to be one of the favorites in the A-Sun. So, that's one thing. But still, like, you have to take care of your own business. And that was nail in the coffin-esque for if Nevada didn't do it, I think North Alabama did for their at-large, because, I mean, you take a deeper look into what Mississippi State is, they now have a losing record thanks to the San Francisco Dons. And like we have mentioned throughout the last few weeks of some WCC teams playing SEC teams, the SEC teams it's a pretty difficult conference. So life's not going to get easier for the Bulldogs. I think as a quasi effect, it may hurt the Dons' resume. So that's for me, I share those same concerns long-term about USF, because they keep getting pounded on the glass. I will give credit to the fact that we finally saw Tyrone Riley wake up and take over a game. That's what we've been waiting for. That's kind of what we've been yearning for. Like, don't stand off in the corner. Like, we've seen you do better. We know you can do better. And this time, I think this is one of the first games this season where I've seen him take immense ownership of what he's doing out on the floor. And I think that deserves credit in a vacuum. And I think another adjustment that Chris Carlson made was starting Mookie Cook. Barry Wong went down to the bench, and I think it worked out, but going both ways, because Barry's not forced to like rush himself and say, "Oh my God, I have to defend my starting role." He can play his own role, play his own game. And while he went 0-4 from 3, I like the fact that he went to the basket, because in some games he's kind of just become reliant on his 3-point shot and just assumes he'll get himself going that way. So to see him go to the basket, I think was an encouraging sign. And Mookie Cook, I know sometimes he has some wild turnovers, but I like the spunk that he brings to the floor. He tends to dabble in a little bit of everything when he's out there. But look, you can only have so many like process victories and moral victories at this point in time for USF in the season. Now it's time that you got to start stringing wins together and stringing good wins together, because time's running out. And if not already against the wall, they're probably already falling to the mat, getting ready to be TKO'd.
Mookie Cook, 9 points, 11 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 blocks in that game against Mississippi State. So as you point out, a little bit of everything. And yeah, him getting inserted in that starting lineup, I think, is a step in the right direction for this USF squad. I mean, we'll probably say it was probably a couple games, maybe a little overdue for that move to have happened. But here we are. That's where USF is. They do play St. Louis. They're going to be at St. Louis for a true road game on Saturday. And we've already seen how St. Louis has done against WCC teams. The close win against Santa Clara. Then they go down to LMU and blow out the Lions down there. So this is another big test for USF. Again, like if somehow the Dons can piece it all back together and get a win at St. Louis, that is a big, big win. But they have a lot of makeup to do when it comes to their at-large hopes. Like, we're probably at the stage for the Dons that if they're going to get back into that conversation, not only are they going to have to win at St. Louis, they probably are going to have to win out against everybody except for St. Mary's Gonzaga, and then they're going to have to take at least one of those games.
I think two. I think two. You got to get two at this point, especially. This is more of a referendum on the bad losses they've taken to Nevada and North Alabama. That forces you to step up beyond the standard that you've showcased. So I think two is the minimum now.
Well, I will say this though, because when you think about like the success that Santa Clara's had, because now that's at least a one quad one and probably another quad two game against Santa Clara. Same actually can go for Pacific right now. The Pacific is also right now in that category of a quad one, quad two, based on location of where you're playing them. So at the very least, you do have a few more opportunities if you sweep Pacific, you do well against Santa Clara, take one against St. Mary's or Gonzaga, and maybe you're going to still be okay in the conversation. But that North Alabama game is going to just hover and just be sticking out like a sore thumb on the resume of USF. And the fact that they really haven't had great performances otherwise is also just kind of like damning for their chances. And they're just going to try to find San Francisco in the net right now. It's like, 127 right now. And this is a team that is 0-3 against quad one and quad two at this point. The North Alabama, that's a quad four. That's a quad four loss. And we know that usually any team, especially a mid-major that has one of those, is dead on arrival. But St. Louis on Saturday, we've talked a lot about St. Louis because we've already seen them a few times in the WCC. So again, tough matchup for the Dons. It's really chasing them off that 3-point line, trying to rebound well, like rebounding. If you're USF, that feels like that's the one big key for them every single game at this point, because that is where they have just been bludgeoned night in, night out. Luckily, they were +3 against Mississippi State, so that was a better night for them on the boards. But they got to keep it up. They have to continue to be better on the boards than what we've seen over the first month.
And the reward for that effort is Robbie Avila. So nice and easy. Obviously, another day at the office. Not a problem whatsoever on the glass. So I'm sure the Dons will be +30, no problem. But a big challenge from several different fronts. And the thing is, and I go back to the Santa Clara game, it wasn't even Robbie Avila. It was the guards getting downhill and getting to the rack that really shaped things up. And I think when you look at USF, it's kind of pick your poison. If you can stay in front of the guards, that's great. But now Robbie Villa may be taking Guillermo Diaz-Graham out to the perimeter and working that way. And then if he wants to go bang down low, then who's going to stop him and get on the glass? And then conversely, if they can't stop the guards, well, then Robbie Villa doesn't have to do too much, and the guards are just getting free lanes to the rim. So really a chicken and the egg type of problem for USF. But that's why they play the game. And we're not, decide this game on paper. We got 40-plus minutes down in St. Louis.
Well, now one of the other teams we've talked a little bit about that are continuing to climb our power rankings is Pacific. And this Pacific squad, we were talking about it last week that they were going to be playing Cal on Saturday. This was a game that it seemed like it could have gotten out of hand for the Tigers early on. They were down double digits pretty quickly, but climbed back into this one. They ended up losing to Cal 67-61 on the road. But I mean, I look at this second half and they clawed all the way back in. We're down 5 down 4 with 1:20 left. They actually got it down to 2. So this was a Pacific team that had a chance to win this game against Cal late in that contest. And we didn't expect Pacific to win necessarily, but we wanted them to have a good showing. And that's exactly what they had. And they did this on a night where Elias Ralph did not have a good game at all. They found it in other ways. They pounded Cal on the glass, and we're just looking at this Pacific team more and more as maybe not even just like a potential dark horse. It's like, nah, they will be the dark horse when we get to WCC play.
I don't know that I'm ready to put that moniker on them yet, but I do think that they're a team where you can't just gloss over them. I think that's kind of like, for sure, kind of the stand of where Pacific is right now. I legitimately think they could finish 5th or 6th in this conference. I don't think that's too much of a stretch to say whatsoever, considering what we've seen. And in all honesty, when we look at the power rankings that we just put out, I honestly probably should move Pacific back to 5 now that I think about it. Like, I think I overreacted to the Dons win against Mississippi State and didn't give enough credit to how Pacific stayed in that game, because a massive credit to Isaac Jack and TJ Wainwright for keeping Pacific in that game. They were really putting pressure on Cal, both in the post and from distance. And I think when you look at going forward in long term, Elias Ralph will have more of these games because you tell me that St. Mary's, Gonzaga, Santa Clara aren't going to have him as 1A, 1B, 1C on that scouting report. All right, what else can you do for me? And I think having TJ Wainwright, I think Isaac Jack performing like that, especially with Isaac Jack's efficiency entering the day, I think he was like 75% from the field and only shot 7 of 9. So that number goes up. So Isaac Jack, I think that's one where obviously you don't want to hit him shooting like maybe 25 shots a game, but if you can get more out of him and maybe get him up to 10 shots a game, I think that'd be really good for his numbers and his stature. And I kind of do want to see going forward who are more of the secondary guys to step up. I thought Jaden Clayton, I thought had some good spurts. Jayon Pitt has had some good games over the course of the season, but I want to see more from him. So at least for me, that's kind of where I stand on Pacific. I think they're a team that can catch anybody sleeping, but I'm not going to put necessarily the dark horse moniker. I think they're a year away from that, or a year of sustained success. And depending on how the roster shakes out, I don't think this is the year for that type of characteristic to be labeled on them. But I do think that they're a hell of a lot better than they are last year, and I think they're a hell of a lot better than some of the teams that in the WCC right now. I think Pacific can easily finish 5th or 6th in this conference.
Well, I mean, I guess I throw the dark horse on there because I look at the rest of the conference. I don't know who else would be the dark horse right now, because I mean, you look at the rest of the conference and we've talked about the struggles of everybody else because San Diego just cannot seem to get off the mat. Pepperdine has seen like opponents to some of the other conference opponents and is just, we haven't seen it all be put together. Aaron Clark's having a really good year and want to point out of like he's had some great performances as of late. But as a team, we just haven't collectively seen the Waves be able to put it together. They lost to Vermont the other night, which was a team that Oregon State also faced and just ran off the court. Oregon State getting back into the win column, snapping that 4-game losing streak. Much needed, obviously, for the Beavers to kind of to get back into the win column. Washington State losing to both Bradley and Nevada this week. Again, we talked about Washington State's tough schedule really from the get-go of the season, of how this could really be something that either is going to be very good or it could snowball on this team. And right now feels like we're still in snowball mode for the Cougars. And then there's Portland, who's just kind of hanging out there. Like right now, I think we have both stuck at our 8th spot in our power rankings. And you know what? Like we were talking at media day, where Pacific has finished each of like the last 3 years in the WCC standings, 8th. Like they're like usually like right there. That's where their spot is. And so if anything, we can say like there is consistency with Portland about where we have them. They're kind of in this mode of they're winning a lot of the games that they're supposed to win, but they haven't come close to winning any of the other games. Like there is a definite gap between Portland and the tier below them, and then Portland and the tier above them. LMU's kind of also right there in that tier above them. And I do want to point out, like for LMU, I mean, is it as simple as that they just haven't had Jan Vide in these games as of late? Because I was just staring at the numbers. Since Jan Vide played the first 5 games of the year, they were 5-0. Since then, they're 2-3. They have not shot above 43%. They're shooting 40% from the field, 30% from 3 as a team. You're missing Jan Vide's 15 points, his 6 assists, and his assist to turnover is 2.5. And they just really have not been able to substitute that. AJ Thomas has been kind of the fill-in. They've had JJ Amy try to do that a little bit more as well. But like I don't know if it's as simple as like they just need Jan Vide back to get back into the mode they were early on, or maybe it's the teams got tougher and this was gonna happen anyway to the Lions.
I think it's a little bit of both, because Jan Vide, I think when you look at the phrase of straw that stirs the drink, I think he's chief among the creators, especially for the LMU offense. His performances and his like presence makes life easier for MJ Amy. So it makes, when you look at the scouting report, like we talked about with Pacific and Elias Ralph, it's the same deal for LMU. Because look at the elevated attention that gets on MJ Amy now, because obviously while they're still very capable people, and like you mentioned, chief among them, some of them right there, Jan Vide just makes life easier for everyone, for Rodney Brown, for Jalen Shelley, for AJ Thomas, for a bunch of the guys. But without him, I think you really miss that creation and consistency, because you look at what we've talked about in terms of LMU needing to take that next step. It's been about their offense. I don't really usually have to question a Stan Johnson defense from their effort, their tenacity, and ability to rebound the basketball as a team. But going in offense, how can you create your best shot? How can you continually string together good possessions? And that has always been the essential question for years on end. And now you're coming into a rut where it's kind of like a chicken and the egg problem once again. Is it the problems that we've been kind of relapsing about, or is it really just a symptom of the good teams mixed with not having one of your best creators? And I think honestly, it's a little bit of both.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to have to see it linger all too much longer. I do want to see Jan Vide back in that rotation and see what this Lions team can do as they start to finish out non-conference play. We've got a few more weeks left. The games this week, good. Obviously, we're going to be paying attention to St. Mary's Boise. We're going to be paying attention to. Just lost my thing here. Obviously Santa Clara, Arizona State, USF St. Louis, Gonzaga, UCLA, like a ton of big matchups this weekend, this Saturday. I'm sure that you're going to be paying attention very closely to Santa Clara, Arizona State, but is there one of the others that is now going to be on your to watch list?
I want to see if St. Mary's can get the Idaho Falls monkey off its back, because it's not a debilitating thing for the resume one way or the other. Even if they win the game, it's not like, oh my God, you beat Boise State on a neutral floor. It's just another good notch in a very solid St. Mary's resume that's starting to build. And conversely, I think if they lose the game for the third year in a row, and I hear you yelling from the East Bay, I think it's going to be, it's not the season's over loss. And I'll be on the opposite end of what I was telling you at the start of this show. So for me, I just kind of want to see how they continue to operate, because it's a unique environment, obviously, because there's not going to be that many fans there. It's a neutral site court, and it's not the battle for Atlantis either. So I think I want to see how Josh Dent continues to assert himself. How does the Andrew McKeever, Harry Wessels tandem play out against Boise State? I think the Broncos, compared to years past, I don't think they really have at least for me, they don't have as much of a presence in the paint as I'm accustomed to seeing from them, at least for now. And I want to see how St. Mary's can try to take advantage of that. I know their shooting has kind of failed them in Idaho Falls for these past few seasons. So can Mikey Lewis get to the rim consistently? Maybe Josh Dent is we run guard to guard action and something like that. Paul Smorauskas maybe more in the post up game. So just kind of like those little mini matchups and in seeing what St. Mary's can do at Boise State. What say you?
I mean, obviously, I'm gonna be watching the St. Mary's Boise State, assuming I can watch it, which we keep an eye out to see later on in the week. We actually can watch the game. But I agree with you. I think the shooting is better this year, so I think that's going to travel a little bit better. But of course, we will see on that matchup. The one non-St. Mary's one I'm looking at this week, I mean, it's got to be USF and St. Louis, only because I need to see if the Johnson get back off the mat. Can they do it in back-to-back games? Go on the road, get Mississippi State. Go on the road, get St. Louis. Can they do that? Now, of course, the best matchup is going to be Gonzaga UCLA. That's going to be an exciting one on Saturday. Battle in Seattle. That's always going to be a good one. Those two teams, when they get together, is much watch television. UCLA Gonzaga give us some of the best games, usually all year long. So I'm going to be excited to see just how their depth and their defense continues to carry. And hopefully we get a classic Mick Cronin press conference after the game.
Look, when I tell you, and I forgot if I've said this already, but UCLA played Cal at the Chase Center about 2 weeks ago, and I was there for that game. And I'm telling you, Mick Cronin losing press conference is a rite of passage as a media member. And I experienced that full on. And I'm telling you, it's rare that you're geeked up for a losing coach to come into the press conference room. And that's exactly what happened to me. And you're just going to get, the UCLA beat writers told me, you're either going to get angry Mick Cronin wants to burn the world down, or you're going to get depressed Mick Cronin. And either of them are just absolute cinema in terms of sitting down, seeing quotes and seeing mannerisms and all that. And I received the end of depressed Mick Cronin over at Chase Center. And if Gonzaga is fortunate to get the win that escaped them last year, I'm intrigued to see what Mick Cronin shows up in the press conference room after. We will be tuned into Theo Lawson and gang out there out in Seattle to see what comes of the press room after the fact, if Mark Few's Zags can beat Mick Cronin's Bruins.
All right, well, that'll wrap it up for this edition of the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. Be sure to hit the subscribe button for the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you listen to the podcast. Follow along on social media at unofficial WCC pod. That's Thomas. I'm Zach. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we will catch you later.